Ready? Here we go.
Different points of view and highs and lows. A new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind, drown out the noise, and see if this connected. And see if this connected.
What's up, fam? The mission of this Connected podcast is to connect generations and situations about faith, life, and whatever comes along the way. To not necessarily agree, but be listened to. These conversations, of course, highlight the perspective of our various guests, and you are always welcome to agree or even disagree. But as always, we hope that it is done in charity. Now, here's your host, Catholic.dad.
Thanks again, Tony, for that intro. And tonight, we have a special treat for you, fam. Tonight, I've been asking for this guest to come on for a while. Actually, I've been waiting for over 10 years. I think it's about 10 years because it takes that long. It took that long. And you know what? A great story, fam, for a guy who I really admired and a wife who got me started in this business. So it's all her fault. All this is her fault. You're going to meet her and you're going to meet the man that she loves and adores. On this episode of this Connected podcast. So without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm going to name who they are and where they come from. And then they're going to introduce themselves. And we have a really great episode for you guys to learn about what we're going to talk about. So, fam, here they are. Deacon Robert Gonzalez and his beautiful wife, Lorena. So right here, fam, we're on that camera. They're a little bit nervous, fam, so, we're going to forgive this. This is going to take a while to get through, but you know what? As we say, they can't bite you because this is a pre-recorded episode.
Right.
So, fam, these two are my favorite people at St. Mary's. I have a lot of favorite people, but I truly admire the fact that these two have been able to do what my wife and I won't do because we're not called to this vocation. But Deacon Robert has a great story to tell. And I just want to share that his wife, Lorena, was the one. Me and her started this crazy group, this youth ministry that started at St. Mary's Parish that got it all started for us. She went a different route. I continued on to this route. And so they're holier than me.
No,
Not holier.
No.
Not holier.
So, Deacon Robert, tell us about yourself, and Miss Lorena, tell us about yourselves, and then we can go on to the topic at hand.
I guess the only thing I could probably share is that I'm a regular guy called to something extraordinary. God called me, and I said yes. And that's pretty much who I am. I'm just a regular guy who said yes to God.
Come on, just a regular guy?
A regular guy.
All right. So, how did you get started with a vacation? When did you feel? Well, before that, we always forget about Lorena.
Mm-hmm.
So, Lorena, tell about you. So, the woman.
Well, me and Robert have been married for 30 plus years, and we have 4 children, and we're very happy. We're the strongest that we've been in our relationship is now. And, when Robert was called to this calling, it was a little scary. I wasn't a very studious person, and I had to do a lot of studying, and I had to walk through this formation with him and do all the works with him. So that was really difficult to make it. But I took the leap of faith because I had faith in my husband, and I always tell him I'm his number 1 fan.
I'm number 2. So the wonderful thing about you guys is that I know a little bit about your story. Our listeners and our viewers don't know your story and the beauty of that story, but we actually do have a past. Like, we all went to the same high school.
Mm-hmm.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. Shout out to John A. Rowland High School
There you
in
go.
Rowland Heights. We went there. And for you guys who knew us then, we're not the same people.
Not at all.
Not at all. So those things, we're not even going to talk about. But I looked you guys up in our old yearbook, and I'm like, yeah, we look pretty good looking kids.
A lot less gray hair.
A lot less gray hair. I colored, and I shave it off.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that you're like willing to flaunt that.
Right.
That's wisdom right there. But so your calling, and your start in the faith started. Here, let me rephrase that. Were you always into your faith? Because I think a lot of times our listeners and young people who listen are like, oh yeah, that's a deacon. He was born that way. He always knew that he was going to be a deacon. So
Right.
were you always that into your faith?
When I was young, I was. I always went to church every Sunday with my mom, my grandmother, and church was very important to us. I even told my wife that when I was 15, I wanted to become a priest. And my mom had said, no, I think I want to have grandchildren. And so it wasn't that she didn't say yes, but she really didn't encourage that vocation. But I've always had faith. I've always had that. But, like so many young kids today, you turn 18 years old and you're on your own. You're considered an adult. My mom didn't make me go to church anymore, and I stopped going. And it wasn't until my wife wanted to make her confirmation later in life, and she asked me to be her sponsor, and I took the classes with her. And that's what kind of brought me back to the faith and just the love of it.
So you had to go, Lorena, you had to go to adult faith formation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that was at St. Mary's.
Yes.
Who was your instructor?
Mary Lesham.
Gosh, I love that woman.
Definitely.
Just to tell you folks, if you've ever been in our studio, half the room are things from Mary Lesham.
Yeah.
Right.
She was like,
incredibly beautiful woman.
she was like, I don't know what to do with all this stuff, so before my kids throw it away, I'm gonna dump it at your place. And so, yeah, I have no idea what's in there because they're VCR cassettes, and I
Right.
don't have a VCR, and they're cassette tapes, and I don't have a cassette tape player. But they're here, Mary. If you're ever looking for your things, they are on the wall. They're organized and shelved. So one of the things that came about, because I knew that you went to Mary and Mary taught you.
Mm-hmm.
So while you two were going through those classes,
Mm-hmm.
first for you to get confirmed, did that like re-spark? And what was it that occurred during those classes that sparked that fire again?
I think it was her passion for it. Mary she just dripped it. I mean, it was just all over her. And I wanted whatever she had. Because she was always so happy. I didn't care how long she was there at the church. She always had a smile on her face. And I was like, that's what I want. And with going through the confirmation, it reconfirmed my own commitment and my belief, things that I didn't remember. And, it was just awesome. I mean, she always had that glow about her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and that's what's so beautiful, listeners, is the fact that many a times it's someone within the church that comes to you and greets you that kind of stokes that fire back and brings you just like how things happened here with Robert and Lorena. It just took that one person. And I remember the reason why we are at St. Mary's is because of Mary Lesham.
Mm-hmm.
Is because that first day where we walked into that warehouse, she was the first person that greeted us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, are we in a Catholic church? Because
Right.
people don't greet you that way.
Right.
And she asked for my name and my wife's name and my children's name. And then the following Sunday, she remembered to say hello. And I was like, I like this church. This little warehouse church. The people were so friendly.
Definitely.
And
I love it. It's my favorite place in the world.
And that's how we met you guys, too. So there we go.
Right.
And so, therefore, let's talk about from there your yes. When did you say yes, and how did that come about, and where did Lorena come in on that?
You know, I had been struggling a little bit with myself, because I lived very materialistic, and I remember I was telling my wife that I was really depressed and not happy, and I go, how can I have a beautiful house, cars, money, have everything, wife, kids, and still be so unhappy? And so one Sunday when Father Brendan was still at the church, he did, the gospel was the rich man, and how he tells him, give everything you have away and come follow me. And I don't know what it was, but that knocked me down to my knees. I went home. I gave everything I had away. I had watches and I had all this kind of stuff. I gave it all away. I didn't want it no more. And that was the beginning of like, okay, there's something more here for me. I didn't know what it was. And that had went on a little while, and I didn't even know what a deacon was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know. And I kept on telling my wife, I said, I think I want to do something more, but I didn't know what. And she goes, well, just pray on it, and then we'll see what happens. And I was on retreat one Sunday at Sacred Heart Retreat House in Alhambra, and there was a priest there his name was Father Anthony. And I was sitting there in contemplation, and he comes up to me and he goes, what's going on with you? Nothing, just here drinking my coffee and nothing. No, something's going on with you. And then he goes, and I go, no, nothing's going on. He goes, no, something's going on. What's going on with you? I said, well, I'm kind of contemplating becoming a deacon. I don't know what it is, but I'm thinking about it. And he goes, how long are you going to make God wait?
Mm.
And so he left, and that was pretty much my only interaction with him that weekend until the closing mass. And he came up to me and he handed me a paper bag. He goes, this is for you. And it was a Holy Spirit dove surrounded by fire. And I just lost it. I was crying, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I told Lorena, I said, what do you think? And she goes, if you want to do it, go for it. I got you 100%. I had no idea what was entailed or how long it would take, but that was the start of our journey.
Well, Lorena, if you knew that you had to take those classes, would have you said yes?
To be honest with you, Arnel, when we found out, I thought like, oh, well, maybe I can talk him out of it. Maybe this isn't for him, But then that was the little devil behind me whispering in my ear. And I realized that. I said, how could I keep him from doing something that God is calling him to because of my fears? Mm-hmm. And I said, no, he's not going to not do it because of me. If he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to do it, I support him whether he does it or doesn't do it. But it's not going to be because I'm not willing to put my arm out, because it's not going to come from me.
And you got a Proverbs 31 woman right there.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky, blessed.
No, I don't think it would have been possible to be where I'm at today without her. Not even. And, and one of the things when we started the program, everything was always husband and wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand it. My wife was, why do we have to do this stuff? Now I get it. Because I might be up there on the altar during Mass, but she's doing just as much ministry in the pews as I am, if not more. And she's touching so many people just because of what we've done together. Yeah, so many. Yeah,
and it's beautiful because you guys are equally yoked. You guys are pulling together.
Mm-hmm.
It's. I remember a priest saying one time, when you're unequally yoked, you're going around in circles.
Right.
Because one is pulling and one is pulling away, and so you're never getting to your location. So you have to find a way to equalize that, so that you guys are pulling together.
Right.
Might take you a little bit longer, but you're pulling together.
Right.
So that's beautiful, and thank you, Lorena, for giving us that gift. because I think what people don't realize is when the wife says yes, that gift is not only to you, but it's to all those people you get to minister to.
Right.
I have
So-
to share one more thing with you now.
No.
That
Okay, just kidding.
that yes that I gave to Robert in a private setting was my first yes. In formation, throughout the entire time, every year before the next one, I have to say yes at the beginning of that first year, and I have to say yes at the end of that year. Because if I would say no throughout his formation, they would pull him from the program at any point. So I had to keep saying yes and keep saying yes. And
Wow.
that yes stood strong. And there was a little bit of a strain that we had like towards the end. But it wasn't my not saying yes. It was his thoughts. But that yes was always, when he was struggling with it the most, I was more secure with it. I knew he was making the right decisions and pushing forward.
And what a great example of what God calls us to, which is obedience.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's not enough of that. You know, a youth the other day asked me, Mr. Arnel, what's the opposite of sin? And I'm like, like love. You know, I'm thinking this, and then I was listening to a priest and says, you know, the opposite of sin is obey. It's obedience, and from that obedience comes all the graces.
Right.
I was like, and that's what I gave. And he says, can you expand on that? It's like, no, I haven't finished listening to the episode of this priest is saying. You listen to it. But has, you know, you mentioned that in the last year it became a little difficult. So I guess my next question I wanted to ask you was it always like easy? Because a lot of times when people hear, oh, you said yes to God, and it's like, oh, well then, you know, I get to flutter around and you know, everything's so joyful and it's easy. And so was it easy for you, all those? By the way, how many years did it take?
It took us a total of 8 years.
8 years.
8 years total. We had 1 year with the PMFP, 3 years CMFP, and then 4 years of diaconate formation.
And how many more years of continued?
And I have 5 more years of continued post-ordination formation that I have to do. So, yeah.
Okay. I am going to add you to my prayer list because that's a lot. And, you know, but so was it always smooth sailing for you guys?
No, you know what? Academically, it was. Doing the homework was easy. I can do it, you know. We had some instructors. Her name is Emma and Deacon Antonio Mejio, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. And they were our instructors the third year of formation. And they brought in a book called Urgings of the Heart, dealing with your shadows and that kind of stuff. And helping us build a relationship on who God is, who God is to us. When we started the program, they had us draw a picture, which I thought was kind of, you know, remedial, but I drew God as the old, you know, fire and brimstone type of God. And when I finished, it was a God like a father. And it was going through that really was the struggle, because I had to look at all my imperfections, why I am the way I am, and make I had to reconcile with a lot of my childhood traumas that I had, and forgive people before I can move forward. But it was really, really difficult, because I really did the work. I you know, we would read it, we would discuss it, we would argue. I mean, it was really awesome. I mean, we learned a lot, but that was the hardest, was the third year. And
the final year.
The third year. This is the third going into the fourth year.
Okay.
And it was actually Christmas time, about that time, when I took a sabbatical. I stopped. And
why? Did you plan on quitting, or what's that?
I didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just so lost. And I was dealing with all these hurts and stuff that I had to take care of first before I can go forward. Because one thing I told my wife was that I always had I thought that I was doing it for her. I was doing it for my dad, my mom, Sister Marie Andre, Father Al. And I thought I was losing sight of why I was doing it. And then finally, when I decided I'm going to go ahead and stop for a little while, I was like, oh my God, they're going to be so angry, so upset with me. Every single person was like, it's okay. You have to do it. You're doing the work. That's what's called discernment, is that inner battle. And I so encouraged. Father Al was like so encouraging to me. And
He said, if this isn't for you, it's not for you.
mm-hmm.
You know, that's okay. But he was so fearful with the people that he admired and loved, that were so proud of him for being in the program, that he was going to be a disappointment because he didn't want to. And it wasn't because he didn't want to. You have to remember, we had 2 years, almost 3 years in the pandemic. And so now it wasn't interacting. We were doing these things online. It was disconnected, you know, a lot of disconnection, and even disconnection from the church. It was this whole thing. And then we were still doing this urgings of the heart, where we were really deep in our hearts. And we were having to look at the reflection in the mirror. So it caused a lot of other extra demons to come out within, you know, and that battle really started. And when he said, you know what, I can't, I said, you got to do what you got to do. I support you 100%. And then everybody that he thought he was going to let down supported him in the sense of, you need to do what's good for you, whether it's the diaconate or not. You need to do what's best for you. And through that encouragement, and then he went to therapy. He was working on himself. And through that, he found himself, and he says, wait a minute, I am doing this for me. And I'm not just doing it for me. I'm doing it because God has called me to do it. And he realized, I'm not doing it for anybody but for me and God. And everybody else is going to benefit from the fruits of my labors.
Exactly.
So,
So, you know, I forgot to, I didn't realize it, and I just remembered that these deep parts of your formation was during the pandemic. And, you know, those are what I call the dark lost years.
Right.
And, you know, to make that really difficult part of your formation semi alone,
Right.
that's a huge challenge.
And, you know, I got to tell you, after I came back, we were going to be instituted as lectors. We came back, we got accepted back into the program, and everybody, all the guys that were there, were literally crying when they saw me when I came back. And they were like, if you can't do it, I'm not going to be able to do it. Because they, from on the outside, they always thought that I looked like I had it all together. But yeah, they were like, oh my God, if you can't do it, you know, we can't do this. I think it was encouraging to them. And that's when we started getting back into in-person meetings. And we realized that we're all struggling with the same doubts and fears and confusion and everything. We were all doing the same thing. It was just, it's amazing, you know, how those years really affected it.
Is that doubts of, am I enough, or am I worthy?
Oh yeah.
oh, yeah.
I mean, to this day, I'll be up on the altar, and it's like, what am I doing here? When Father hands me the chalice and I lift it, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm here. You know, when I first started, I would lose myself because you're just enthralled in it. And all those little words take on such a different meaning. When Father carries that host and he breaks it, it's a different world. You know, it's just so beautiful.
I love the thing he said to me. The first time he held the chalice in his hands and he raised it, the reflection of Jesus behind him was on the chalice.
Was inside the cup.
And he was like almost wanting to fall to his knees, because it was like, here he is, he's in my presence and I'm holding him, you know, and and he tells that all the time. He goes, every time I lift it, I look and I see that reflection of God on that chalice.
See? You know, one of the things I admire so much about you is your humility. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that.
I think the things when we always look at the people on the altar is like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
But you exude something that I admire from like Father Brendan, and how your movement is humble. It's not something that says, that commands people, hey, look at me, I'm Deacon Robert. It's, hey, come to me, I'm Deacon Robert.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I think a lot of young people will look at you and flock to you because of that humility. Because in a world that we have today lacks humility.
Right.
And that's so much when people say, well, who is that guy? Oh, he's Deacon Robert. It's like, well, wasn't he Robert just a couple of months ago? It's like, yeah, but now he's Deacon Robert.
Right.
And you know, and that's that's beautiful, because it's something to aspire to. Humility is always something to aspire to.
Right.
And so you didn't quit,
No.
but you almost quit.
Almost.
And who stopped you?
I think it was God. Yeah. Through prayer.
Yeah.
Like he just like, you're going to be all right. And I had such a sense of consolation that came over me. And I was like, you know what? I am where I'm supposed to be. One of the things that we would always talk about, and because I am an introvert, I'm a very shy person.
Me too.
And
Right.
Right.
For anybody that knows Arnel,
Let me-
that's not true.
Hey, take the camera off me.
And one of the things that she would always tell me is that she goes, I don't know if you're going to be able to do it. To go up there and read the gospel, to give a homily. How can you do it in front of 500 people?
Wait, she doubted you?
She doubted my, if I would be able to do it, because I was such a shy person.
And he also likes to be home. He's a homebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you can't do that no more. You need to do. And I wasn't doubting him. I wasn't trying to discourage him.
Challenging.
I wanted to let him know that, remember, if you're taking this on, you're taking it on for the whole thing, not a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Not
a
just
big
for the
picture.
mass.
It's not just the mass.
I don't want to be an altar ornament. My work is out in the with the community.
Where is my pen? That is the quote for the evening. I do not want to be an altar ornament.
That's one of the things they told us when we were going through formation, is that they don't want us to be altar ornaments. They want us. We're supposed to be with the people. A deacon is supposed to be that bridge that is from the altar to the community. Because we're walking on both sides of it. And so, yeah.
That is the quote of the night. It's because, again, that quote follows through what I admire about you is humility.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of people who go into diaconate. There's a lot of people who go into anything because they want to be seen. They want to be the altar ornament.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me, look at me. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, no, we're not looking at you. We're looking at Jesus.
Right.
And
Right.
I remember you guys were coordinators of altar servers. And I said, a really good altar server is an altar server that doesn't get seen, but does everything to perfection, but you're not there to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so love that. That's going to be like the quote on our little promo here. So now that you're a deacon, now that you're up there, not an altar ornament, looking at the chalice, seeing Jesus, Miss Lorena already said, you're a homebody, but you can't be a homebody. Now what? What do you feel called to do?
It's serving with the community.
Yeah.
I love being with the people. I was always, a long time ago, I used to be myself. I would like to put myself in the room and pray by myself and do my rosary by myself. But being with community and being with the people and praying together, I tell her all the time, I love being there. If it's for a meeting or whatever, it's like, I love it.
He goes on Wednesdays, every other Wednesdays, and he works with what's the name of the group?
It's the prayer group, the women's prayer group on Wednesdays.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he does that every other Wednesday.
It's a funny group.
He meets with
They're
the
great.
group,
They're great.
ladies,
Shout out to the ladies.
Yes. And then he loves to take communion to the sick and the homebound.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that he's always been passionate about, taking Jesus to people that can't receive.
Mm-hmm.
That was one thing that I brought up when we were going through formation, because Bishop Barnes was really really into prison ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always like, I don't mind doing that, but I mean, that's not really where I feel my call. And I remember we were talking with Bishop Rojas, and I told him that, I know that this is what you want us to do, but this is where I feel called to. He goes, that's just as important, if not more.
And here's the thing too, is when you talk about prison ministries, going to the sick and homebound is a prison.
Mm-hmm.
You're in prison in your own home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more difficult because you have a desire to come out, but you can't, because either you're sick, you're
Right.
old, you're elderly, or no one will come to you and help you. So
Right.
that is such a great ministry. I know, some of the ladies who used to do that, but they're getting older, so they can't do that. So it's beautiful that you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we had talked a little bit before this that you wanted to speak about being a man, being a Catholic man,
Mm-hmm.
what the importance of being a Catholic man.
Mm-hmm.
So let's touch on that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean about the importance of being a Catholic man?
Through a lot of prayer, I look at the world that we live in, and, going through the Me Too movement and all that kind of stuff, I just think that men sometimes just get lost, and they take things for granted that they shouldn't. And where their priorities should be, they're not. And one thing that I learned was that if we want to encourage our kids to grow up and to be faithful Catholics, we have to be the ones to set the example as fathers. Not that mothers are not important at all. I'm not saying that. But as fathers, we do have, set an example for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because why would my son want to get up to go to church if I'm staying home to watch football?
Right.
Or if I'm not going to say grace at dinner, why would my kids want to do that when they get older? They're just not going to have that, because I didn't give that to them, And one thing that she said is, which is so important, because we're all given when we're born a backpack that we put stuff in through all our lives, things that we learn, things that we're taught. Are we putting faith in there for our kids? Are we putting the love of Christ and for community and for neighbor? Are we giving them the things that they need to be good Catholic people, good Catholic men? That's what I think is so important.
It's to have that example
Mm-hmm.
of how to grow in faith
Mm-hmm.
as a man. I think what you touch on there is really important, because the statistics that are out there support what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That if the father is not going to the Mass, then the likelihood of their children going to Mass is a lot lower,
Right.
significantly lower than if it's just the mother who's taking them
Right.
to Mass. And psychologically, the women in the household, the women are the nurturers.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who nurture their children, but it's the fathers that lead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in a way, our society has, our men, in a way, have also placed that on the woman to do it all.
Right.
And it's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
It's a concern. So it's important. So now we talk about the importance of being a Catholic man, leads into being a Catholic husband, father, brother, etc. So what now? I mean, what do we do? How do we talk about that? How do we grow that in the church?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. One thing I was, Father Arturo was asking me, what are we going to do to help get more men to come to church?
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the challenge. How do we, being an example, one thing that, that I hear from a lot of women is, they tell my wife is, I wish my husband was like that. I wish my husband was like your husband.
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. Don't compare me to, they're on their own journey.
Isn't that awful thing when you're like, I am not the best husband?
No.
Well, like when they approach me and they tell me that, oh, I wish my husband was more like yours, I wish my husband was, and this is before my husband was a deacon, and oh, he's so committed, he's always here, and then I said, look, by you comparing him to anyone is not doing any good. What you got to do is plant the seed. I go, invite him, tell him how much you miss him not being there with you. Don't nag him and make it a thing, because now now you're making it a fight. And then I go, so don't do that. I go, just plant the seed. God's going to come and water it, and it's going to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Invite them with love. Invite them, maybe making them feel bad. Like, oh, I missed you so much today. I was thinking about you. I was sitting next to this lady and her husband, and we're holding hands, and I look over and you're not there with me. Make them feel sad that you're not with them, because they are a part of you.
Yeah.
And for you men that are listening, you need to be there, because we are alone, when you're not there. And that's another transition for me. I don't have Robert next to me anymore. So I feel out of place, and I'm you'll see me now, I'm the bouncing around. I go sit next to new people every week, because I don't want to sit alone. I'm used to holding his hand, and I don't have that no more. But for you men that are out there that are even contemplating anything, be there for your wife, be there for your kids, because it's important. We're lonely without you, even if it's for that hour at church.
It's kind of like the reason why, we go to Saturday Mass. It's because I usher at the 11 o'clock Sunday Mass. And when you usher, you don't get to sit with your spouse.
Right.
So I've been telling the ushers, like, you need to go to a different Mass and then serve at this Mass, because you're not worshiping, you're working.
Right.
So, maybe some of the men out there will take that advice and do that, because it's beautiful to see couples sitting together and worshiping together.
Right.
So in that sense, being an example, showing that example, but finding, I think the hard thing with inviting men is what is there for them, at church. And I had some really great ideas of what we can do, but trying to find the time to actually do it with men. So that's really challenge. And I suggest, fam, if you're out there and you have really great ideas or things that you're doing within your parish community that works, to invite men to come together, shoot it our way. Send it to our podcast and share it with Deacon Robert, or you can go directly and send him information about what you're doing within your communities of how to entice men. Now, here's the thing. When you go to some of those non-Catholic churches, they have men's group. So what are they doing right that maybe we're not doing quite as well?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, it's something that's really, made me scratch my head. I don't know what we're missing.
I think, one of the things that I always looked at is, we've always been so Marian focused, and it's beautiful that we've forgotten that there is a Joseph that led that family.
Right.
And I think silent Josephs are great, but there are times where I do believe that Joseph was not silent all the time.
No.
He just didn't say anything in the scripture.
Right.
But I believe that, being that strength, the people follow.
The one thing that, go ahead.
I just wanted to add something about that, Joseph. I had a young boy in my confirmation class, and that was his saint that he chose. And I sat with him and I asked him, well, why did you pick Joseph? What was the thing? He goes, because I have a stepfather, and he is a stepfather to Jesus. And he goes, and Jesus turned out not just because he was God, but his maybe his mannerisms, maybe his politeness, his craftiness, and being a woodman. He goes, that was taught by Joseph.
Mhm.
So his manliness, his way of being a man, was because of Joseph. And when he said that to me, I was really taken back because I had never really thought of Joseph like that. I knew he was, you know, there, but I didn't think of it in that young boy's life. So for all you fathers out there, what an example, especially you
Right.
stepfathers, you know, you guys are in likeness of Joseph. So it's beautiful.
Exactly. We have Joseph right there.
Yes.
The image of Joseph. Kind of a little modern version of Joseph, painted one of the young adults. I think everything here was painted by one of the youth. But again, it's kind of like it behooves us to really focus and encourage young men to participate and be active in ministry because it attracts people.
Right.
And I think that's something that the church needs to focus on is exciting young people aside from the priesthood and the diaconate to serve in ministry.
Right.
Because if you look at any other Catholic church out there and you look at who's leading ministry, it's a lot of women.
Right.
And so and that is something that actually I think men don't want to get into because it's a bunch of women. I mean, can you imagine a married man saying, I feel like called to come participate in church and it's a bunch of women and you're
Right.
like, I don't know how my wife is going to look at this.
Right.
And I know that that's not the intention, but that is unless your wife is totally going with you. And there's very few men and women's group. It's either a prayer group full of women or not.
Yeah. One thing that that we've talked about is, and I was thinking about what you said. What do Christian churches have? And it's fellowship. The Knights of Columbus is big about, brotherhood, fraternity, and we had talked about doing a camping trip, putting together a camping trip, bunch of guys, pitch your tents, go camping, and then at night dinner. We'll do some prayer, and just get to know each other. And that was one of the things that we've always talked about doing. Going on a fishing trip, going for a hike as a group of guys who are Catholic. So maybe, who knows, maybe that'll be something we'll look into doing.
Yeah, I want to pitch this idea because before leaving ministry, I kind of wanted to do this and pitch this idea. But, when you go into youth ministry, many times it's really difficult also to get young boys to come to ministry. And I remember listening to going to a conference and how they got the dads to come to church because men don't go to church, the wives do. And so when the dads didn't go, then the young boys didn't go. So he went into a parish community that was filled with women and their daughters. And where are all the men? Well, they were at home. And what were they doing? Well, sometimes they're fixing their car, working on their trucks, changing oil. So this really creative youth minister from Montana decided to do this. He decided that he was going to start ministry, and they would change the oil of parishioners during Mass. And he invited a couple of dads and their sons, and in the back of the church, parishioners would line up their cars, and then they would change as many cars do oil changes. And it taught the dads to come. It taught the sons a trade. And the old ladies who needed their oils changed got it done by people who cared enough about their vehicles. And then the young men would drive it up to the line, and the ladies would do that, and they'd get all oily and stuff like that, and then they would go to Mass before or Mass after.
Right.
But I thought that is such a creative idea.
It's different.
But it invited people to come together, and it served a purpose. And I think that's something with men is they're fixers. They want to work with their hands. They're doers. And just inviting them sometimes to Mass is just, okay, this is good, but it's just mass because they don't yet quite understand it.
Right.
But what the guy did during those oil changes is while they were doing oil changes, he subliminally inserted mass and what it was about,
Oh, nice.
telling stories. And so the guys were like, I don't want to know about that. And so I didn't know about that. So they got interested.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that might work.
Right.
I mean, we have a lot of people who probably could use an oil change that was all you had to pay for was the oil.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know about you, but I think an oil change now is about $80.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine saving a couple $60? Because they brought
Right.
their oil, but here you can change the oil and change the oil filter. And there's probably a lot of young men out there who absolutely do not know how to do an oil change.
I don't know how to do it.
We're gonna teach you how to do an oil change. Roland High School, you didn't take auto shop.
Nope. No, I did not.
So
he took pottery.
pottery. I took auto shop and I blew up an engine. Sorry, and then I was kicked out of that class. But there's so many ideas that you could do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad that you're focusing on that.
Mhm.
Now, is that something that you're called to do as part of the mission?
I don't know. I don't see. That's the thing is I'm so open to anything right now. I'm really focused on learning Spanish because I'm taking classes right now to learn how to speak Spanish because I'm a deacon to the whole church, not just English. So I'm really making it a priority to learn Spanish. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then we'll see what the next door opens up.
So you're taking the advice from Father Brendan and watching telenovelas?
No. I actually started, Andrew Hasse, he gave me some really good advice. He said, if you want to learn how to speak Spanish, start doing the rosary in Spanish.
Oh, yeah.
So I did the rosary today in Spanish. And it was so beautiful because I actually had to read it very, very slow to learn. And then as I went through it, the 4th, 5th decade, it got faster.
Yeah.
And I'm starting learning how to roll my R's a little bit. So, yeah, it works.
And that's hard, sometimes when people look at you, it's Deacon Robert Gonzalez. And it's like, what do you mean you don't speak Spanish? Now, is that
Right.
something that's like difficult for some people to understand? It's like that you don't speak
Right.
Spanish?
It is very difficult. And I had to explain to them why.
Yeah.
Because when my dad was a kid, he was 6, 7 years old in San Gabriel. If he spoke Spanish in school, they got hit. So as my dad grew up, he said, I will never teach my kids to speak Spanish because it was so beaten out of them. And so he never taught any of us to speak, 6 of us.
Yeah.
So but in hindsight, it was a real detriment because I'm so far behind.
Yeah.
But
And that's another episode for another podcast, the issues that growing up, because you grew up in that generation where, our natural language was not encouraged at school and it was not encouraged at home.
right.
I remember my mother said, until you're fluent in English, you may not speak the language.
Right.
And so by the time that I was in high school, I couldn't speak the language. And when we would argue, my mom would be inside the house and I would be outside the house because she had a rule. Inside the house, you didn't speak English. You spoke to her in Filipino.
Oh, really?
But the thing was, we had already lost it.
Right.
So we didn't speak. So
Yeah.
you had to say something to mom. You had to be outside the house.
What did Father Al call you?
Oh, he called me a coconut. He goes, you're brown on the outside and white on the inside.
Oh my gosh. Leave it to Father Al. It's like I'm triggered.
We loved that. We thought it was a great analogy.
It was great.
But that's what we used to call people, though.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I still do that, and the youth always go, it's like, you shouldn't say that. I was like, have some humor.
Right.
Yeah, it was all
be able
in
to
fan jokes.
I think our generation laughed a lot about that. And
Right.
this new generation has a lot of sensitivities. That's another podcast,
Right.
another episode.
Yeah,
Right.
a lot, like 4 or more.
Yeah. So now, getting back to the subject, because Tony's going to get upset with me because I always go off topic. Now, Deacon,
Mm-hmm.
family life,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in the family now looks at you differently, or do they still treat you like Robert?
My immediate family still treats me like Dad, Robert, but it's my extended family. People treat me different, and they like my brother-in-law even told me one time. He goes, "There's something different about you,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's just the way you carry yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I'm a regular guy, like I said, and so I don't use that language anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm careful with what I do, what I say, because you don't know who's around,
Yeah.
So yeah, but people do in my immediate circle. They still call me Dad or Robert, or she yells at me. So she still yells at me.
Oh,
So
the ladies ask me, what do you call him at home? Do you call him Deacon Robert? And I say jokingly, no, but I call him other things.
she does.
She smacks on the back of the head.
Mhm.
There you go.
Like, oh,
You
he's
know,
my husband.
that was something that Bishop Barnes told us when we were going through formation. He goes, "When I go home, I'm Richard. When I'm here, I'm Bishop. But when I'm home, I'm not a bishop."
Right.
So yeah.
Welcome back to reality.
There you go.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah, it's a vocation,
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing dual vocation. I think it's a difficult call.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone sometimes always asks me, "Will you become a deacon?" It's like, no, we're not called to that.
Mm-hmm.
We are not called to say yes to something that's so beautiful that you guys are able to.
Mm-hmm.
We're called to something different, to serve in a different way.
Right.
And I think that's important for people to understand,
Mm-hmm.
is that just because you're a man, you're not automatically called to priesthood and diaconate.
Right.
That there's many other things, which leads to you as a deacon leading a lot of the men to discern what they're called to do, which is serve.
Right.
Knights of Columbus, whatever it is, to serve in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe oil changes.
Right.
There's some other tasks that we can do
Right.
within the church grounds to serve the community.
Right.
So those are really great things that maybe one day we can work together to do.
I would love that.
So that's a really beautiful thing to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, last words of wisdom or advice that you can give to young men or our listeners, or young men and older women, about your discernment process and what they can do, and also about the importance of being a Catholic man.
I think it's just saying yes. That's the big thing. Saying yes and taking that step of faith is scary. And, the priesthood's not meant for everybody or religious life, but to say yes to God is just the opportunity to see what it is, what he has in store for you, And I brought my Bible because I wanted to share one scripture with you and for everybody that's really touched me. And it was my scripture that I carried throughout formation. And if I can share that with you.
Please.
It's called Jesus and Peter. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He then said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was distressed that he had said to him a third time, Do you have me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Amen, amen, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you to where you do not want to go." He said this, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he had said this, he said, "Follow me." That scripture for me was always that God asking me, "Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Tend my sheep." And that's what I kind of used throughout my formation. Yeah.
That is so beautiful, and it's a great reflection. I'm so glad that you use that as the verses during your formation, because it's, for me, that speaks a whole lot of what we all walk through, because we are all called, in different ways, in many vocations, and I'm so happy that you did.
I appreciate it.
And our community is so blessed with the two of you being able to serve as husband and wife, as a deacon and his bride, his beautiful bride. And I truly believe we're going to be so blessed with both of you, the things that are the many fruits that's going to come from your ministry.
I hope so.
And I know so. It's like, God doesn't call. We have that little thing that we used to say, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And I live by that, because when we began this podcast, you said, I'm an introvert, I'm really nervous, but you got the words out, and I think the message that you wanted to send out really got there.
I hope so.
And I believe that many people are going to be touched by the words that you say.
I hope so.
So say, I know so.
I know so.
There you go. Amen. I believe. That's like, so on that note, fam, thank you for coming on the podcast, the two of you, Deacon Robert, Miss Lorena. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
For gracing our listeners with the wisdom that you shared here. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And on that note, fam, if you have any questions, comments, concerns about what I said, not what they said, what I said, you can send all of that to Catholic.dad50@gmail.com. If you want to support the podcast, just click on subscribe. We need subscribers. If you want to support us monetarily, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/disconnected.com, I believe. Tony's going to hit me for not always remembering. All our funds actually go straight to the youth ministries. We do not make any profit or anything aside from, giving it back to the youth ministries that are voluntary. So please support us for as little as $1. You can just support us. Go to our Patreon page. And as always, we ask you to please live a life of holiness, be blessed, and be third. And also, don't forget, please pray for us. We'll be praying for you. On that note, good night, fam.
Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise of different generations of the girls and boys. So sit back and relax, this is Catholic Podcast. Don't overreact if the thoughts are abstract. When it's hosted by Catholic.dad, who knows what's gonna happen?
Hey, what's up, fam?
Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise and see if disconnected.
What's up, fam? To connect generations and situations about faith, life, and whatever comes along the way.
Expect runaway thoughts like a runaway train. Break into conversation like links of a chain. Make a Hail Mary pass, hope this connects. Have a question for a guest, put it to rest. Live a life of holiness, lead by example. Follow at Catholic.dad and Mini Tangled. Christ leads our way, he's the good shepherd. Pray for one another, be blessed, and be there. Different points of view and highs and lows, a new perspective everywhere you go. Open up your mind and drown out the noise and see if disconnected.
That's it.
All right.